So according to the organizers, we have to wait again 2 more minutes.
Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the refreshments. Now it's time for the third roundtable event, which is titled Government Policy Support and Private Financing for Impact. To moderate this session, I invite Dr. S. Maheswaran. Dr. S. Maheswaran is the chairman of the Business Incubation and Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Unit, Faculty of Management, University of Peradeniya. So over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. Right. And welcome you for this third discussion of Social Entrepreneurship Forum organized by the UWSL University. We are very happy to have a very eminent and dynamic panel to discuss about the government policy support and private financing for impact. I think this is one of these important topic. So we are looking forward to hear from the panelists. We have panel from different experience, different background. So my name is Maheswaran, or you can call me like Mahesh. First, let me introduce the today's panel. I will go in brief. Firstly, we have with us Siran Karunaratne. He is the managing director at Hospital House Handicrafts. This is a kind of a fair rate organization providing training to youth in manufacturing of wooden toys and crafts. He served several board membership, including the council member of Chamber of Commerce, and also he's the director of Puttalam District Chamber of Commerce, and also the council member, SAC Chamber of Commerce. Also, he's a chairman of Advisory Committee for Regional Development of Sri Lankan Export Development. So welcome, Siran Karunaratne, for this discussion, and looking forward to hear from you. And then I will introduce Dr. Lalit Valemite. He's well-known personality in social entrepreneurship nowadays in Sri Lanka. He is a kind of a practitioner as well as social entrepreneur for about last 3 years, I think for about 30 years, it seems. So he is a co-founding director and CEO of Lanka Social Enterprise, where he lead pioneering incubate and accelerator program for social enterprises and responsible SMEs in Sri Lanka. He has wider knowledge in the field of enterprise, entrepreneurship, business incubation and accelerations, technology and innovations, equality and diversity, in several others, and also he obtained a PhD in economic geography from the University of Newcastle, United Kingdom, and he also now doing MBA lecture at Peradeniya University, and he was visiting lectures in several universities previously, both in West Indies and UK and in Sri Lanka. So we are happy to have Dr. Lalit, and then Dr. Nimal De Silva, who is one of these well-known personality in the field of enterprise and social enterprise development, and he is a multi-award-winning business professional, and he has a lot of experience in the field of strategy, consulting, social enterprise, new business startup. And as an entrepreneur and investor, Dr. Silva has a unique ability to spot games-changing opportunities. He is currently serving as a co-founder and CEO of Paramount Reality, which is a real estate advisory that provides services across Asia. And also, he's also an academic. He's an associate professor and also the faculty member in local and international universities. Welcome you for this panel discussion. Finally, we have with us Miss Victoria Walker, and she is a design professional and former diplomatic and international relations consultant. Currently, she is residing in Sri Lanka. She is past honorary president for Design for Sustainable Development. I think she is an Australian and has wide experience in the diplomatic service in several countries, and she support particularly to preserve cultural heritage of local, artists, and also is supporting a lot for empowering local cultural entrepreneurs. Thank you for accepting our invitation for this, and we are very great to have you also in this panel. So before beginning this today's session, I will put the present day Sri Lankan context in perspective, and from my perspective, how I perceive today's Sri Lanka, and then we'll go for the first round of discussion. Sri Lanka had a very strong governance and policy framework sometime before, but unfortunately, the present day indicators with regard to the governance and policies continue to be very poor performance with regard to several studies conducted locally as well as foreign agencies. More importantly, Sri Lanka is one of the beautiful countries in the world, but the income disparity between the urban and rural sector and other the problems with regard to the terrorism and the global pandemic, all of them has given the rise to reordering the country's social structure, which is very, very important nowadays. In particular, the pandemic has brutally pushed the economy in an uncertain way, exposing several inequalities, particularly these inequalities affecting most vulnerable groups such as women, youth, and also the global pandemic has negatively affected the SMEs in general. And more importantly, Sri Lanka's economic situations nowadays become questioning, and it's a matter on several discussion forum. And more importantly, Sri Lankan, now we are running out of our foreign reserves that will be, finished very soon than other countries, so that our economic recovery in this context become very, very difficult and vulnerable. More importantly, the unemployment problem in Sri Lanka, both graduates and also the others also now become serious considerations. And some feminists argue that female labor force participation is very, very low compared to others. According to them, it's only 30%. And among them, like 73% of female in working class are economically, inactive. And the female employment in everywhere is very, very high. And also the citizen trust to this government policy become very, very low nowadays. For instance, the government policies with regard to the green agriculture become like challenge, so that the citizens' trust with regard to the government policies also become a problem. And also, if you consider the Sri Lankan administrative system, it is also very complex, and we have five levels of governance structure, like national, provincial, district, divisional, and village level. And we have, while we have very strong centralized system, and we have, in principle, five level of governance, and this prevailing multi-level governance structure have resulted a lot of complicities and crises in governance. And also, Sri Lanka is highly vulnerable for youth unrest in the past due to several inequalities and even the inequalities created by this recent crisis also important concern for policymakers. So we believe that the one of these hopes for everyone is to promote the SME sector. SMEs plays major role in Sri Lanka, and I will quickly read Dr. Lalit, the recent article on it. Like Sri Lanka's micro, small, and medium scale enterprises made up around 80% of all business and play a pivotal role in economic development. Their contribution to GDP has estimated 52. And also, SMEs provide 45% of total employment. So considering the significance of SME sector for recovery and resilience, now we are talking about the government policy and also how the private sector can come forward to support the this important SME in general, in particular the social enterprises. So now with that brief introduction to present day Sri Lankan context, now we will move to the questions. Now, if you look at the history of policy for governing the voluntary service organizations or third sector organizations, we have very long history. We have well-established cooperative law, which is now functioning, and there are even a lot of revisions, a lot of amendments took place. And also in 1983, we have come up with the Voluntary Service Organization Act, okay, which type of organizations can be identified as voluntary service organization. Even that act was later revised a couple of times. Also, we have the Companies Act, companies limited by guarantees. And also recently, Sri Lanka has come up with SME policies where in certain places, these policies talks about the social enterprises also. Now the first question to the panelists, do we need a separate policy for impact investment or the social enterprise in Sri Lanka? Can the existing policy is sufficient to manage the social enterprise sector, or do we need new policy to govern this important sector in Sri Lanka? So I will start with firstly, Dr. Lalit, you can begin with. I think you are unmuted.
Yeah. Good morning, Dr. Maheswaran, and good morning, my fellow the panelists, and good morning, everyone. So thank you for the invitation to join this panel discussion. I think it is very timely, and also I hope that we will have very good discussion around the policy for social enterprises. Well, I think with your introduction, and I we have had this discussion many times before, whether Sri Lanka really needs a policy for social enterprises. I think one aspect is that yes, we do need a policy, but at the same time, when we look at the social enterprise sector, currently Sri Lanka has a very small social enterprise sector, but which is growing, and we have several debates, on the social enterprises, whether the social enterprises do really, the part of the civil society, or whether the part of the cooperative sector, or whether they are part of the SME sector. But I think whatever the sector the social enterprises belong to, but I feel is that the country's policy framework is adequate to support the social enterprises. The question is whether we have the right policy, or whether we are actually implementing the policies that we have in Sri Lanka. Now, I mean, we all know that the Sri Lanka's the policy framework for social enterprises and economic development for the last 30 years, and currently Sri Lanka has developed a very well thorough researched SME policy framework, and which was developed by the Ministry of Industries. But we are not very sure whether that SME policy is really being implemented right now, because the subject of SMEs is now spread across the many number of ministries and departments. So there is no one actually really say who is actually implementing this policy. We really don't know. So this is where we are right now, and whether the SME policy is really being implemented, we don't know. But some aspects of the policy are now undertaken by various ministries. But that is the question, right? We have several policies, but whether we are really implementing these policies for the development of the sector. So this is where we are right now. Time to time, the several incumbent government has implemented their own policies, and some government has disregarded the existing policies and bring in new policies. And we really don't know whether the policies actually continues. This is one of the biggest issues in Sri Lanka. There is no consistency in policy implementation, and also the continuation of right policies. I mean, that's where we are right now. But I personally think, I mean, through my experience, I don't think that Sri Lanka will really need a policy for social enterprises, because we have very the good economic the development policies, and we have a large number of enterprise ecosystem players by the government and also other sectors. But what we really need is this policy recognition. This is what exactly we need right now, because at the moment the Sri Lanka's especially among the public and also among the bureaucracy, the understanding about or the awareness about social enterprise is very poor. So I think we need to bring that, the social enterprise, the concept and their contribution to the government, and convince them that this is a sector, the growing, and this is the sector that can make a difference in the society and the environment. So economically, socially, and environmentally, how important they are for the development of the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lalita, because now he's undertaking some work with regard to finding an appropriate, policy gap in Sri Lanka. So he was the right person to begin with. So now I will move to the, now others are practitioners and your perspective may be different. So please let us know, or let's start discussing from your perspective, do we need a policy for SMEs and other vulnerable sector, which are now growing on the one hand, and their contribution to the economic is very, very significant. So what is your opinion? So I will start with Siran Karunaratne. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I must say thank you, Dr. Lalit, for introducing me into this, and also Dr. Darshana for inviting me on behalf of the Uwabelasa. To begin with, as I would agree with Dr. Lalit, we do have certain policies, but the recognition is not there. I mean, if you ask anyone, do you know of this policy? No one will know about it. I know it's in certain study and in certain documents, but I really believe that recognition is needed. Now, to give you a good set example is now I have my organization has been in the fair trade movement from 1985. But today, if you look at the fair trade organizations that are in Sri Lanka, it's not more than 7 organizations for the last 40 years. The reason is we have not been recognized in Sri Lanka. The value of fair trade is not known. And also like the guaranteed system that has come up in the fair trade movement have made it somewhat, responsible accountability, going for more accountability and more responsibility. And so I really believe that, we need to first tell the communities the value of this, this philosophy of being fair, being sustainable, the importance of environment. The schools, you ask the schools, they do have studies, but when it comes to real knowledge, real deep knowledge, it's only the basic that they have. So I really believe that we need a policy, a good framework, a good policy, and also to propagate, the value of this. And as Dr. Lalit said, he said, the recognition should come from the government, I believe. For example, in my organization, we have 30 in-house staff. Out of the 30 in-house staff, I have 4 differently able, which are very talented. You cannot match their talents, but they have the natural talent that has come from within themselves, where we can recognize and value, and they make value such good, really good products, and this has to be recognized. So, of course, we are in the fair trade movement in a very strong way, and we have certain policies, the fair trade policies within the organization, and which is practiced, and that helps us in gaining more markets, because even recently one of the top American chains have written to us saying, we have heard that you are a fair trade organization, we are looking for wooden toys, and what are the possibilities of partnering, with doing our own brands. So we have already started manufacturing, certain brands, and what they do is, they say is manufactured by a fair trade organization in Sri Lanka. So there's a certain value on the product that comes up. And with this present scenario in the country, we need more markets, more dollars to come in. And we have the answer. We have so much of products and services in Sri Lanka, like our old traditional carving, the olden day traditional carving, which are so valuable. So, I really believe that, at the end of the day, what we need is a market. So go into the market, you have a certain value on your product, and that helps the organization to grow. And when I go for the exhibitions, of course, we have commercial buyers, we have fair trade buyers. But for commercial buyers, what I say is, look here, if you're looking for a story, we do have a story, but we also have a product that has value to life. And that makes it easy for us to for market access. And we see that, trading fair is something that is what the world needs. Everything has to be fair. A fair trade price, a fair price to the end user, a fair price to the manufacturer, fair trade policy, and a fair fair wage. I mean, we see certain situations in our own country where certain situations have arisen, and so many people have lost jobs. But also we have the opportunity of making things good for people if you really have a policy and a framework to work on, which is recognized. So I really believe that this roundtable would be able to gather some information. I mean, see what we could do is put forward a proposal for a paper to the government. And the second thing I want is the Fair Trade Organization, that is the Fair Trade Network worldwide, and also the Fair Trade Network in Sri Lanka, have just come up with a program together with the Export Development Board, which is to be signed in the next few days, where we will start promoting fair trade within Sri Lanka with a European Union funded project, and to propagate fair trade and look for fair trade products in Sri Lanka. So there is something that is coming up. So when the EDB and also the Commerce Department is also involved heavily and getting this paper signed and recognition of fair trade organizations. So I believe this will also be a stepping stone for all other social organizations, like social ventures, like for them to be a part of and to be recognized. So I really believe that there's something good that is coming up in the future, and we can look forward to and also to build on this, where the university, and also like another good thing is there are fair trade cities in the world, and there are fair trade universities, and Weimar University is also looking at getting the fair trade certification. I've been talking with them for some time, and only those certain policy documents have to be signed and working on it. So which means we will have a fair trade university. So opportunities are there, and collaborations are, lots of opportunities are there for collaborations, and also like, market access. And I believe, if we have a policy, if we abide by the policy, if the policy is transparent, if policy is workable, and then we have, we can grow. Thank you very much. I hope.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sigan. I think you have highlighted very important points, like we have policy, but this has to be strengthened further. And particularly you have highlighted the need for very transparent and good policy, which can be recognized and valued by all the stakeholders. So thank you for introduction, and then we will move to the third speaker, Dr. Nimal De Silva. From your perspective, do we need a separate policy for SMEs? The social enterprises in Sri Lanka? Right.
First and foremost, Aibon, thank you very much, Dr. Maheshwaran, for that kind introduction, and also to the UWLS University for inviting me today for this great discussion and a wonderful set of panelists, I think, who can add value to today's program. So to answer your question quite straightforward, if we can get a separate policy for social enterprises, that would be perfect. But of course, we don't live in a perfect world. But what we need is recognition on the impact and the importance of what social enterprises are playing in this particular country and in this particular world, especially considering the commitment that each and every country has made to the sustainable development goals and how to achieve it. And definitely social enterprises play a very important role there. Now, the previous panelists also exemplified that we do have policy frameworks, there is recognition challenges, and there is also ownership-oriented challenges when it comes to policy. My view on this, Dr. Maheshwaran, is the fact that a policy can only be sustainable if there is an inclusive dialogue among every stakeholder in a continuous manner. For far too often, Sri Lanka's economic policy narrative have been dependent on political ideology as opposed to a more futuristic, concrete, sustainable program. Now, whilst we talk about 80% of Sri Lanka's economy or the backbone driven by SMEs, the million-dollar question is from a pandemic perspective and post-pandemic perspective, looking at SMEs and social enterprises, where do we actually get them together? How do we take them forward? How do they help them grow? What are some of the strategies that we can implement to get them to be truly world-class? How do we collaborate with our regional peers? How do we look at market opportunities? Where are the competency gaps? And how are we going to address them? How are we going to encourage the youth of Sri Lanka to take up entrepreneurship as a successful career? All of these aspects, in my opinion, we feel that a lot of people are doing it in bits and pieces. At times we see donor agencies and so forth coming and looking at one aspect of it, allocating a particular budget, maybe let's say for women empowerment programs. But then after the donor funding is over, there is no sustainability in that program. Then we also see the chambers of commerce also doing a wonderful job, but there is only a limit that they can do in terms of engagement. So we need to get the private and public sector involved to identify and see this 2% of the population of Sri Lanka, which is technically the SME population, how can we bring it into double digits? Like regional peers like Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand, to name a few. Because our $80 billion GDP is driven by this 2% of population. Just imagine if you have 10% of our population actually actively involved in entrepreneurship, whether it be social entrepreneurship or any type of entrepreneurship, the impact that we can create to the economy is going to be far more greater. And if you look at the various line ministries also that is there to look after entrepreneurship and economic development, there seems to be a little bit of dilution and overlap of the roles. And partly because there is no inclusive process in terms of getting this policy dialogue in place and the implementation of it as well. So in my humble opinion, I agree that we have policies. I agree that we need to make them more concrete and sustainable. But the million-dollar question is, how quickly are we going to get every stakeholder involved and look at at least a 10-year roadmap in terms of where we want to drive it. Secondly, coming back to the second part of your question, whether it becomes impact investment, of course, we might need to rethink our policies in terms of how we look at investment and how we look at providing incentives to encourage impact investment. Because at the moment, every investment is looked at it from a typical FDI perspective. But when it comes to impact investment, I think Sri Lanka is uniquely positioned to be a game changer in terms of creating some unique proposition to encourage more and more impact investment. Because Asia is leading from the front when it comes to the impact investment space. So Sri Lanka, as many say, can be a next growth haven. I think we can look at this in a slightly more different entrepreneurial perspective when we're trying to encourage it. I think that's my preliminary thoughts. Dr. Maheshwaran.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I think those are well taken. And what you have suggested is very, very important point at the beginning. You can have policy, but we have to make it more inclusive. And this policy should be prepared with the participation of several stakeholders. Then only there will be a recognition for that. Thank you for your initial thought on it. Now we'll move to Victoria. Now she has a lot of international experience, and also you're aware about the role of the social enterprise in a global context. Now the UK is now one of these main or one of the leading the country which promoting the social entrepreneurship through several measures and several the policy framework. Even European Union also has come up with several policy framework to promote the sector. So in your perspective, what do you think about it? Sri Lanka should have a separate policy like other countries, or the existing policy framework is sufficient to promote? So what do you think about it from a person from an you have international experience, and also you have been in Sri Lanka for several years, so you are the right person to comment on it. Please.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And thanks so much for the introduction, and very nice to join you all here as well. I guess in terms of policy settings in Sri Lanka, I would defer to the expert on this, Dr. Lalit. I have to say, not just in Sri Lanka, more generally, the idea of what constitutes a social enterprise is still an evolving area. And there, as Dr. Lalit pointed out, there are different definitions. But, for me, basically, a social enterprise is an enterprise. And in my experience in Sri Lanka, social enterprises can be covered by existing legislation. To me, based on my experience, so the area where there is a policy problem is to do with NGOs and the registration of NGOs. And that, I understand, is a long-standing issue to do with Sri Lanka's history, which I won't get into. And I know that it's a difficult one for Sri Lanka, but it does make it difficult for those of us who are operating in the non-government space to find a home, particularly when we're supporting the social enterprise sector, which is so important. The lack of that policy also, actually, let me put that into a positive. Developing a workable policy on NGOs too will allow that discussion to take place. What makes a social enterprise different? And I think that that is actually an important discussion to make and an important distinction to make. And there's a certain value in developing legislation because it does allow, those discussions to take place. So that would be one point I'd make. The other one is, I think, one that Dr. De Silva made, which is to do with, with the principles underlying legislation. Unless legislation is well understood, or unless it's implemented, then we know of examples where there's legislation that people are just not adhering to because it's either too complicated or it's not relevant, or there's all sorts of policy confusion around. I would make the point that the principles underlying any policy to do with SMEs really need to adhere to the principles of effective SMEs, which is to do with being really rigorous about the amount of, the demands on small business and what is reasonable and doable for a small business, particularly for some of the organizations we're talking about. That unless those principles are reflected in legislation, and more importantly, that we all understand how important it is. Of course, there needs to be regulation, but the regulation needs to be light touch. It needs to be clearly understood. It needs to be something that, a small business, whether it's in Colombo or in the Valley or wherever, that the small business owner can understand and meet and also run a business. So they would be the two main points I would make, Mahesh. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Victoria. I think you have highlighted very important point. That is even in the global context, what constitutes social entrepreneurship? how we can define this important, the concept is still is debating, and there's no any agreement. And still, even Sri Lanka also, that's the same problem. Also, you have highlighted social enterprise. The initiations can be like put it into the framework of Voluntary Service Organization Act and also the NGOs. That is an important point that you have mentioned, because for social enterprise, social goal and the mission driven is the key. That is very, very important when it comes to the social enterprise. So why we can't think about this social enterprise initiation with this the NGOs Act or Voluntary Service Organization Act? That is the phrase or the act says. That is very, very important things. Also, you have highlighted the principles underlying any policies, which is very, very important. How it is constructed, how it is translated, so that ordinary person can understand. Those are very, very important things. So with that, we will move to the second point, and also the audience. If you have any questions, you need to ask to the audience. I think the chat box is the right place. You can put your questions. So I will come to your questions after this second round of discussion. Now, the second point is, I think you have, many of you have highlighted in the first round, is that the building an ecosystem to support the social enterprises. Now, there are a lot of agencies in different scale or in different levels. We have been, we have been talking about this concept, how we can bring all these players together and support these important industries in Sri Lanka. So in other words, how we can build a proper ecosystem which is locally embedded and which is more healthy for this sector to grow. Now, in this discussion, I also would like to highlight now the British Council initiation to establish the social enterprise, incubation cells in universities. Now, in their initial project, they have selected University of Peradeniya, where I am from, and also the Uvavesela University, because university can play a central role in governing or initiating this ecosystem building. So I just want to hear from you. What do you think about and establishing a very strong, ecosystem within Sri Lanka? So, what are the opportunities and the constraints we have where this can, where we can initiate? But I'm thinking university has to play a major role. So, what is your opinion in this? So, I will start with Dr. Lalit. And she has both experience from this outside and also the inside of the universities. So please begin this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Maheswaran. I think when it comes to the ecosystem, I think ecosystem is a very, very complex thing, and it's a very complex space. So let's look at the Sri Lanka's enterprise, the support ecosystem. I think we have the multifaceted ecosystem in Sri Lanka, consisting of public sector, private sector, the non-governmental sector, academic the sector, and also even the consumer organizations are also playing a huge role, and the financiers, impact investors, and so on. So universities are the one of the sectors in the ecosystem. So what the universities can do to they promote the concept of social enterprise and even entrepreneurship, and also the support the social enterprises. Again, I think when you look at the role of the universities, now if you look at the Sri Lanka's the universities, now actually it's very a good sign that universities are now the changing from the traditional teaching universities to become a kind of a entrepreneurial universities, bringing more business and entrepreneurial, and connecting with the communities, contribute to the economic development. So it's a very good sign that universities have lately identified that there should be a shift in their role, and how should they contribute to the local, regional, and national development. So that's a very good sign. And the second point is, I think we are still in a space where the public still think that the universities, the role, as like a conventional the role. But I think that is something I see in the Sri Lankan context. How the general public and also see the role of universities. I still think that the universities are still not connected with the communities. So this is one of the issues that I see with the universities, because now that is because I think there's again we have an issue with the relationship building with the universities and also the other the ecosystem players. Now, I don't blame the university, the academics, or any individuals for that matter, but I think that is because our traditional place for the universities in Sri Lanka, I think that had to be changed. Now, how we can change it, by doing things. Now, one of the good things is that the universities now engage in the business incubation and entrepreneurship and business support. I think that need to be highlighted, that need to be communicated, and also the people to understand the universities are different now. So this message has to go to the communities and the general public, and also for the policymakers and also the other ecosystems. I think this kind of inclusiveness, as Dr. Nirmal very rightly said, I think this kind of inclusiveness should be brought in to the university. So with that, I think my experience is working with universities in other countries. I think I have seen that the universities are really placed in the regional development, for example, in the UK, and also in other countries, and also in the Caribbean. So we see that the universities are playing a big role in regional policies, regional development, innovation, and the working with the SMEs, the private sector, and also how we communicate our research. Say, for example, the universities are the centers of excellence and in terms of knowledge. So how do we transfer this knowledge to the communities, to the business? I think that need to be that need to be fully restructured, and have a very close relationship with the private sector. How do we transfer our knowledge for the betterment of the sector? So in terms of impact enterprises, I'm going to call the not social, but the impact enterprises, how the enterprises can create an impact with the support of the ecosystem players. So I think this relationship has to be the strong, and also the universities will have to do a lot more to convince people that universities are at the heart of the community. So this is what my view on this.
Thank you, Dr. Lalit. I think you have highlighted very important problems. Now we have universities are not connected with societies. It's one of these long-standing issues we have been discussing, and I think we have to find the ways out. Now, I also would like to share with you, now recently the UGC has come up with one of the strategic priorities of the universities is about the level of community engagement of universities. So that now become our strategic priorities, and now we are working on it. I think with that priority, I hope universities will more engage with societies. Particularly, I also believe that the social entrepreneurship is an important idea through which the universities can think about their community engagement in the future. Right, now I will move to Victoria, because she has a lot of international exposure. Please share with your thoughts what the role the universities can play in order to establish strong ecosystem to support this important sector. You have any recommendations you can suggest, anything? So we are looking forward to hear from you. Right.
Thanks very much, Mahesh. On this question, I have to say that the role of universities in the sector I work in most closely, which is design, and well, cultural industries more generally, but specifically in the design area. Certainly my experience in Sri Lanka is that, that certainly on an individual level, we've actually got some very good collaboration. So I can't make a generalization about this, about industry policy more generally, but certainly in our area, that there's some very good collaboration going on and some very good, very good leaders in that area. But my observation is here and elsewhere, so much of that's driven by the individual, and there are some, and that sort of leadership in the university sector, to me, should be something that we say more about, because from my perspective, so often you get change by supporting those who are in leadership positions and who are, who are being more innovative and reaching out, rather than trying to pull the whole sector with you. So that would be one point I would make. Another, though, is that this area that we're talking about, social enterprise, impact investing, promoting social good through new mechanisms, is a fast changing area. And so, and the only way we can do this effectively is by collaborating across silos. Now, it's not something that comes naturally, particularly in the business community. And I don't think Sri Lanka is on its own in that regard. But you asked, Mahesh, about, about things that we do well. So in that sector, in the craft sector and the design sector in Sri Lanka, I actually see, quite a few positives. One is that there are habits of cooperation here, primarily because Sri Lanka is a small place and that you tend to know others in your sector. So there, we've got other examples in Sri Lanka where sectors have pulled together to develop codes of conduct, for example. And I see that that does happen in the craft and design sector. One brand supporting another, and promoting the social good behind the work that they're doing. Another is not just habits, but there's a willingness to work together. So we have things like design festivals, Innovation Island campaigns, other things, which when we are working together, we're very powerful because we can tell a story that we can't tell as individual enterprises or as an individual, lecturer or somebody within government who has an interest in this sector. But the third thing, I think, the other thing that I find that is very strong in Sri Lanka is that there's such an amazing story to tell. And, social enterprise is successful if it can gain attention, if people say, wow, and, and it can market itself. And to me, the story here is extraordinary. It's to do with the creativity of this island. It's to do with the unique history of this island. Some of the rich traditions that are here that surprise people, particularly those who look at Sri Lanka and think it's another South Asian country. Well, it's not. It's a very unique island country with a very rich and interesting and complex history. And when a sector can get together and tell that story and surprise people, such as we can in the craft sector, when we, show beautiful batiks or amazing hand looms, or, Dumbra, which has just received UNESCO listing because of its uniqueness. It's, we've got a terrific story here to tell. So just to summarize, and I've gone a little off the university collaboration point, but my point is that in a sector that requires innovation and new thinking, there are good examples here, but it requires each of these different sectors, non-government, government, university, thought leaders and others to really be willing to work together and to tell the story effectively. Thank you, Mahesh.
Great. Now, what you have highlighted is very, very important. In the case of entrepreneurship or social entrepreneurship, what is important is how you can promote creativity and innovations. In order to materialize these, so everyone has to work together. That unity is important, even for develop this country, to bring this country forward. So those are very, very important point. Now I will move to Chihan. Now you have a lot of experience in fair trade, and in the context of fair trade, what you mean by this ecosystem building? How far the Sri Lanka, in the context of fair trade, we are successful in building, the ecosystem. So please share your experience in this.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Maheshwaran. And I must say, like in the ecosystem, universities are the most important. I really believe that, because we do have. I'm talking on behalf of Gospel House. We do have a partnership with the Industrial Design University in the Delft in the Netherlands, where they send their second-year students for an internship program. So what the student does is, now they are all industrial designers. So this is a model that we do. We started, and for many years, I think from 1998, every year we have these students coming, and they work together with our product development team, and they work as to they're fresh, the importance of fresh ideas, thoughts, and the designs. They come out is completely unique. They're completely different than what we think as a manufacturing organization. So what the students do is, first what we do is we will introduce one of our buyers in Europe, where the student will travel to this buyer, talk with the buyer, see what the product range is, what kind of ideas what the buyer would need, and then they would come to Sri Lanka, do the designing. They come here for nearly about 10 weeks, which is about 3 months. They work for about 3 months. We get all the visas, everything organized for them. And they come out with such good quality, unique, fresh ideas. Now, this is something that I've been thinking of when it comes to entrepreneur, like the social enterprises system in Sri Lanka, and also the university, the role of the university. Maybe if there are any students, like the students who do studies of entrepreneurship and also about who studies about social enterprises, I mean, they can go back to their village, pick up a small business what they have, they are linked with. Maybe they are the grocery shop that the small village would have. Help them, give them some ideas, thoughts, and help them, and talk to them about the importance of social entrepreneurship, about becoming a social enterprise in a small way. I mean, even like building, helping, I mean, out of the finances that this guy has, or this guy or this lady would have, to, do something in the community and, start small. If all these students could pick up a project, I think that's a good place, a good platform. We can start propagating. First thing, as I said, we need to get this message across to the communities. If not, we will fail. If not, we will fail. So when it comes to the fair trade organizations, also the important thing is product development is there. And we make use of the opportunities of the universities that are fair trade guaranteed universities are there. And they will work together with them, and also the fair trade cities, and where they promote fair trade. Like, for example, even the writing paper has to be of a fair trade product. Even the tea has to be a fair trade product within this, within the town, in the council of the town. So they do practice. So the main thing is they're getting that message across to the community, to the grassroots level. So maybe it will be an opportunity for maybe a program to set up where the students who study in the universities to pick up a small business in their village or in their community, whatever they are, talk to them, work together with them. Of course, it's not, money what is involved, but it's that, working together, getting them confidence and showing them the importance of becoming a social entrepreneur. And I mean, if I was just thinking back, this word entrepreneur, it started working, it became a reality in Sri Lanka maybe about 20 years back. It was only after 20 years, and just before 20 years, when the Federation of Chambers of Commerce started on the Entrepreneur of the Year award. And suddenly all these companies picked it up. And then they had the micro and the small, medium, large, and extra large, categories, the awards that, that helped them to promote that Entrepreneur of the Year. So the same way, I would believe if we have something like, maybe the Social Entrepreneur Awards, where the universities can get together, do the evaluations, do up a nice application form. I believe there will be so many big organizations in Sri Lanka that would sponsor these kinds of programs, because everyone is now becoming aware of the importance of social entrepreneurship, because there are so many, I believe, I work with another 2 organizations in Sri Lanka. We never sold anything in Sri Lanka. All our products made, was exported to all these countries, mainly to Europe. And then these 2 organizations, they came up with their own design. I said, look, Yeshiran, can you manufacture this? I said, only one thing, we will manufacture it as long as you're willing to accept that we are a fair trade organization. I said, yeah, here are the certificates, but you have to promote the word fair trade. And now what they say, they said it manufactured by a fair trade organization in Sri Lanka. And they said it in Colombo. And then we see how the importance, and we get even that, that response, that the thought, the idea. And recently we had one of the famous actors in Sri Lanka called Roshan Ranasinghe, if I'm right. Yes, he picked up a few toys from us, and he's made a nice video. And he said, these are the best wooden toys that is there, and they are ethically. He said they are ethically sourced. So that word is more than enough for my organization, by a celebrity to get my market. So I believe the universities can help the small timers, the grassroots SMEs, in the village, talk to them, share them the experiences, tell them the importance of, becoming a social entrepreneur. Tell them, you are different from many others. Yes, you do your business in an ethical way. a responsible way. And I believe that that will give a great opportunity. I think universities are the key, will be the key to get this message across to the community, because it's recognized. Universities are recognized, well recognized. They have the students. I think some of the students, I think some batches could be even 300, 400 students. I mean, in a batch of who are studying entrepreneurship. And I really believe that universities can play a role, and I really believe that we can do something in Sri Lanka if we really get the whole structure right and the program right. Thank you so much. I hope that's.
Yeah, thank you. Now, you value the role of universities in promoting the idea of social entrepreneurship, because entering to the Sri Lankan universities, I think it's tough and very, very competitive, and we get the best out of best to the university system. So why you can't use this talent people to promote this important concept? I think it's an important idea that you have shared it. Thank you for that. And then I'll move to Dr. Nimal De Silva. Now, if you look at the history of Sri Lanka, traditionally Sri Lanka is a collective society, and it is evidenced with the several the functioning of the cooperative system in the beginning. Sometime before the cooperative system was functioning well, even if you take Jaffna, it was highly recognized, and I think still it's functioning somewhat good, but there are a lot of problems. So the building the ecosystem or building social capital and how we can work together is not something new for Sri Lankans. That is one argument. And also nowadays, some sociologists also tend to argue that Sri Lankan society is something status quo, and people wanted to maintain status, and there may be a kind of barriers for us to work, collectively. So, in your point of view, and how we can re-establish the idea of collectiveness and also the mutuality in order to promote this the important sector social enterprise in Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a interesting question, Dr. Maheshwaran. I think, in my humble opinion, we will continue to be a collectivist country. I think our culture, and if you go back in history also, we are molded and shaped from that perspective. One of the reasons for Sri Lanka's resilience, maybe during a 30-year-old plus brutal war, various insurgencies, and even how we are managing the pandemic, also shows how we work together, how we think together, and very much our culture is what's probably our best defense mechanism as well, to a certain degree. It works well at certain times and it doesn't work well as well. But coming back into the school of thought, and I'm going to take a cue from some of the previous panelists who talked about the university system and the role. Let's take that as an example, and I'll also probably take an example from many of the work that I do in rural Sri Lanka, especially on entrepreneurship development. So if you take the university system, there is no doubt that we get the smartest brains in this country coming through a competitive education system into the university system. But the problem that we are having within the university system is, and I'm very glad to see Peradeniya University and ULS University doing the hard yards to create the university business linkage and then create incubator cells, and the amount of work that you're trying to do in terms of creating entrepreneurship. Now, the role of an university, in my opinion, is to encourage creativity, is to find problem solvers and get the youth to think differently so that they can use their uniqueness for the greater good of society. Now, in that scheme of things, while you encourage creativity, universities also need to teach students on how to fail fast and learn fast. And that's the mantra of entrepreneurship, right? If you speak to any entrepreneur, it's not that they can always brag about their success. There are many areas in which they fail and they've learned fast and move forward. And that's what we need to get from our university system, and get the students to say, you need to take risks, you need to take calculated risks, but then you also need to be focused on what you want to do. Now, one of the challenges from a cultural perspective, very sadly, is the fact that we still, from a society perspective, give more emphasis into traditional job roles, traditional career pathways, to be a doctor, to be an engineer, to be an accountant, lawyer, etc. And more often than not, if you feel that your child, son or daughter wants to be an entrepreneur, there's a good chance, especially out of Colombo in particular, 8 times out of 10, they'll say, no, you might as well get a public sector job. You got a guaranteed pension. Why do you want to go and try things new? And why do you want to venture into risk taking? Now, the challenge of doing that is that you got smart people who mingle around and who has some of the best ideas, probably being stifled at a society level, not wanting to move forward, right? And as a result of that, what we see is that we have the other regional economies across Sri Lanka, either through a coordinated effort or through by virtue of being pulled through a pull downing effort, are moving towards that. I'll take a simple example of Bangladesh. If you take a decade ago, the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Bangladesh was rather unknown. But today, you would see, if you go to any part of Dhaka, they are not only technology savvy, whilst the educational standards in comparison to Sri Lanka, whilst it's not the best comparison to make for multiple reasons, their notion of entrepreneurship and their pull towards entrepreneurship is far more greater. Now, in a global economic perspective, if you were to find solutions to real world problems like the pandemic or any other sustainable development goal, an entrepreneurial approach might get you an opportunity to solve that problem faster than a traditional approach that we take. Now, I would like to take this conversation in that level. So whilst we have a collectivist culture, which we know will continue, and that is part and parcel of our DNA and our resilience framework, we also now need to start encouraging and looking at Sri Lanka not being what we are today, but what we want to be in the next 50 years in the global landscape. So how can we collaborate? What can we learn from other economies? How can we get the best students in Sri Lanka to go overseas, identify what's happening there, and bring back that knowledge over to Sri Lanka? How can we get Sri Lankans living abroad who has gone for studies to come back over here and set up a business, set up an entrepreneurial venture? What kind of incentives can we give them for creating their first venture? So I think we need to be starting to look into that perspective to encourage it more and more. But last but not the least, if I'm to give some words of advice to the students who are listening to this particular panel discussion, I think irrespective of a chosen pathway, all of us have some entrepreneurial spirit within us. And you have exemplified your ability to use your knowledge and achieve greater things. So if we can also now start looking at the problems around you in your society and look at innovative ways of solving it, I think that's the opportunity that we have. And the good thing about social enterprises in particular is that once you find a solution to a problem, it's easily replicatable in different economies, in different countries, right? Whether it's alleviation of poverty, whether it's clean drinking water, whether it's clean sanitation, or whether it's access to education, all of it remains the same. So I'll give you, in concluding this particular point, a classic example. I've been to one part of rural Sri Lanka, and the students over there were really struggling because of online schooling. And the problem was that they couldn't have a proper connectivity, and they didn't have the tools like a mobile phone or a laptop to learn online education. So a particular Buddhist monk thought in an entrepreneurial manner, use the society's usual norms and framework, and said, okay, I have a particular location. I'll speak to one of the consumer electronic companies in Sri Lanka, and I'll get a 60-inch TV to my society hall. And through using one of the ISPs, he was able to bring in an internet connection and actually teach more than 100, 150 students a day so that they don't miss out on their classes. Now, this is in essence what creating impact is all about, right? Now, if you replicate the same thing, and if you look at it from a different perspective, that's what Idea Mobile did in India as well, from a commercial angle. So I believe there are opportunities. We just need to start looking for it and think out of the box.
Yeah, thank you. It's great. Now, you have highlighted traditionally our value system and our beliefs and even our habits are more closer to connect each other. So I think we have to rethink how we can even go a bit stronger, connecting each other, in particular to promote the social enterprise or enterprising system in Sri Lanka. Right, I'm still looking for some questions from audience. Now the numbers has rise to 134. It's a big number. Also, the audience can use this chat platform to post your questions. We will take it up later. Now, the next round of discussion is about the alternative financing for develop the social enterprise. So government should not be only the source of finance for the social enterprise or SMEs. On the other hand, if you look at the status of financial sector in Sri Lanka, which is well developed, and our financial sector is almost equivalent to in developed countries. So we have well developed financial sector. But unfortunately, this sector is not for SMEs or large or the small scale providers. For several reasons, this sector, this well-developed financial sector, is not for the SMEs or new startup. There may be a lot of problem for that. So, my question is, or not question. So, how we can think about how we can promote the private sector financing to be oriented towards the social or sustainable development goals. What are the possibilities and the challenges we have in order to promote this financial sector to be an important stakeholder, the investor in the social development or sustainable development goal. So what are the possibilities and the challenges in Sri Lankan context? So that will be the next questions. I will start from Dr. Nimal De Silva. I think you are the right person to begin. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think from a social enterprise perspective and especially from an impact perspective, there is a huge focus now on impact investment because the traditional financing methodology of equity or debt, especially the debt side of it, there have been many challenges in terms of people identifying what would be the impact goals and what would be the return on investment on that perspective. So as you typically know, both by definition and in practice, impact investors are much more patient. They look at the long-term growth of a social enterprise based on the impact measurement tools as opposed to the traditional matrices. So I think in that scheme of things, we see, as I mentioned earlier, in one of the points that I made, that we see a lot of especially Asian millionaires also now using their family wealth towards the impact space. We see many corporations also across the world, the large multinationals also consciously allocating more and more money towards impact-driven investment. In my opinion, I know this is a little bit of a contentious comment that I'm going to make. I think the notion of corporate social responsibility will definitely need to move away. If not, it needs a whole new revamp. I think if I take a classic example to narrate this, and this is something that I tell in many of the programs also, a well-known Sri Lankan entity, corporate entity, collected around 2 million Sri Lankan rupees to donate some books and shoes for some needy students in Anuradhapura. But whilst they allocated 2 million rupees and they collected it as part of their CSR fund, they did allocate about 1.5 million rupees to print t-shirts for all the staff, take a bus, get them their lunch provisions, etc., and spend about another 1.5 million rupees promoting it in all the newspapers and radios, etc. So the question is, you've allocated almost 3 million rupees on marketing effort, whilst the real impact has been only 2 million rupees. So this is where we have a challenge if corporate social responsibility is not managed properly. But on the other hand, if you look at and move away from that into impact, then there is a huge opportunity for companies to really look at and playing an active role. So if I take Sri Lankan perspective, I'm very happy to see there is even some public quoted companies now where they're talking about impact goals at boardroom level. And that's a huge positive sign. And I think in this region, we are also setting a benchmark in terms of this impact dialogue now. It's only when a CEO or the board of directors talk about this that you can see real commitment coming in. Now, for impact investment to work in Sri Lanka rather than traditional angel investors or venture capitalists, we also need to create some frameworks around it on how access to capital is going to come in, how easy is it for money to come into the country and go out of the country. So we need to now start looking at that policy a little bit more to create a more investment-friendly, impact investor-friendly framework. So it's also fantastic to see entities like the UNDP creating a social impact fund, and they're working with entities in Sri Lanka like the Lanka Impact Investing Network to identify great business ideas, social entrepreneurship ideas, and invest in them through an impact fund. So I believe alternative finance is the way forward, and I believe that more and more, especially the millennial investors, are looking at impact investment as one of their important investment wallet, as I may call it, objectives. So I think we need to now look at how we can encourage it more and more. And again, I know I've reiterated this a number of times, but in order to encourage investment, it's not only the policy, it's not only the ease of doing business, but there also has to be some incentives, at least in the short term, because we are also now competing for smart capital, right, across the world. Everybody, every country is competing for capital, whether it's impact capital or traditional capital. So if we are now competing for that capital space, then we need to make Sri Lanka as an investment destination. So we need to get the basics right. To a certain degree, a lot of hard work has happened, but now we need to consciously work on this. And I think it's a responsibility of everybody to put their hands up and make this happen.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you have highlighted several points. Like sometime you said one of the problem of why the private sector is not involving is maybe the private sector is not properly managing their CSR activities properly. That also might be the one of the reasons. So we'll move to Dr. Lalit, and from this policy perspective, how we can better orient the private sector organization to invest in the sustainable development goals in particular, or through this social enterprises. So what is your opinion on it, how we can promote this? Because I think everyone understands that the Sri Lanka's foreign reserves going to end very soon. Government doesn't have a lot of fund to finance or even to provide subsidiaries for this important sector. So definitely the role of the private sector definitely come forward and support this. So what sort of suggestions or recommendations or any possibilities for this shift? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Maheshwaran. I think my view on this is that very simple, and also I agree with Dr. Nirmal. Moving capital, private capital for investment is something that the Sri Lanka will have to work more on the creating the policy and the environment conducive for private investors to invest confidently in business and also in creating impact. So I think we need to look at the banking and the financial sector in a different aspect. We have one of the strongest with the banking and finance sector especially in South Asia, and the majority of the people heavily rely on the bank finance and the banking, the credit through the formal the financial institutions and all the private financial institutions. So our culture is quite different to to other the developing and the developed countries, because we have more reliance on credit. And also the second thing is the investor confidence. So for example, now if I'm investing in my money for a better return, so I always look for some kind of savings, the scheme. I invest in the high interest the savings the scheme, so I know that my money is safe, and I also know that I get a fair return. So investing in another the business or even in the stock market, I think we in Sri Lanka, I think people are not really aware of how to manage your risk, how to balance your risk, where you put your money in, and how to get a return out of your money. So I think this is where the key issue is, the more financial literacy in terms of investment. So so this is where we really have to work on to move private the capital for social enterprises and also the create impact. So therefore, I think first thing is the policy framework has to be conducive for private investors, and also the public perception on accessing private capital is also something should be there should be change, and also should be encouraged for people to look at the private the investment. I'll tell you one example. Now recently, I mean in 2018, the stock market created the platform for SMEs. So where the SMEs could access the investors for investment. So unfortunately, so far only one SME has been been able to access finance through their SME platform. So which is very disheartening, and also frustrating. Why such the huge facility is not being properly used by the majority of the SMEs. So these are the areas that we need to develop. More SME confidence, more investor confidence has to be the developed and also the encouraged. So therefore, otherwise, what will happen is we have the huge savings in terms of the private capital, and also we have another the SME sector waiting for money. So we need to bridge this gap. So in other countries, I mean, the Dr. Imal, myself, and the Lean, we all involved in the impact investment, the platform in Sri Lanka, and we regularly communicate with the global steering the group of impact investors, and we see what kind of innovation in the impact investing sector in other countries. Globally, I think that there's a huge movement in terms of impact investment, and also there's lots of innovation. Money is moving from philanthropists to the private, the businesses, to the small businesses, and also the create impact. Money moving from the large, the philanthropies and the corporate sector to the find solutions for social and environmental problems. So this is how the capital is moving from the more profit the centers to more social impact centers. So I think we need to create that culture here. I think that we all can get together and make this happen. So that's my my view on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lalit. Now you have highlighted the building the investors' confidence is very, very important, and more importantly, you also highlighted lack of financial literacy among our SMEs, and this is why they also have tried to go for the public to get some shares. So the building the confidence is very, very important. I think this is also in a way connected to entrepreneurship, like how we can promote our entrepreneurs, the young entrepreneurs, to take some calculated risk, investment risk, which are very, very relevant point. And I'll go to Victoria, and please share your opinion on this particular concept, how we can promote the private sector to be the part of these initiations. Yeah.
Thanks. I'll keep my comments brief. Other panelists have more, longer experience on this issue than me. My knowledge is primarily, anecdotal. Seeing investors in here working in my sector and the sorts of things that appeal to them. So speaking to the university students who are listening in and, wondering, whether this applies to them, what principles they should take from this discussion. To me, the wonderful thing about social enterprises is that they're not a charity model. It doesn't rely on charity to be successful, which it's not a good business model. And that's incredibly appealing to investors because it's a really good story. It's a story about a business which provides, dignity. It has a social outcome. It's a story investors understand. And I think a related point is that sustainability is the name of the game these days. So any serious business person, investor, whatever, is thinking about the future and, about different models of doing things and how we work in a way that protects the environment, that thinks about the future of our kids. And in my sector, for example, in design and elsewhere, issues such as use of waste material, promotion of better dyeing practices, development of new materials, all of this is, is super appealing. And that's what we're seeing in our sector. In the design sector here. And the other thing that I'm seeing is on the demand side, a lot of consumers, and to have a successful enterprise, you've got to have a market for it. On the demand side, the social enterprise story is a wonderful story. It's a new story, it's an innovative story, and it's a young story. So I would strongly encourage you, if this, discussion with these experts is, inspiring you, think about, before you even think about financing or, donor support or investment, thinking about your story, what makes it special? What is it that is driving you and that makes you passionate? Because if you've got a story to tell and you're passionate about that story, you know, it's super appealing to investors. And that's certainly what I've seen in this sector. And one of the things that makes me so, frankly, inspired by the social enterprise sector in Sri Lanka, where I see it working well. But I would just make that proviso, as I started with, that this is not about charity. And I agree with Namal that some of our corporates still seem to think that CSR is, well, they confuse charity with social enterprise, and that's fine. You can support charity. I'm not saying that that's wrong. But for me, the social enterprise story, which is about dignity, it's about impact, it's about innovation, it's about looking at the future through a different lens, is super inspiring. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very inspiring thought, particularly for our young students. Thank you, Victoria, for sharing that. Finally, in this round, I'll go to Sihan Karunaratne. Now, in this particular questions, I will put the perspective in this way. Now we are, and I think what has been highlighted in the third round is the possibilities for public-private partnership. So the following from the Ashoka Foundation's full citizenship concept, where they promote NGO corporate partnership as one of the strategies where how the corporate can address CSR or citizens matter, and also how can the NGOs collaborate and provide some some business ideas to the corporate. So in your opinions, how we can promote the corporate or the private sector to work with charities and foundations in Sri Lanka? So what are the possibilities we have in Sri Lanka to promote that? Is there any, I think there are some organizations already started to working with foundations and NGOs, and how we can further strengthen this particular the phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I would agree with all the other panelists. You know, we have the impact investors, we have the organizations, the big companies who has their CSR projects, and also there is also private capital available. But the important thing is that, you know, finding this social, what we call the social enterprise, finding them, and who are really into that, you know, into that business, you know, a sustainable business, a very special product, you know, and also the philosophy, the entrepreneur, this particular, the vision, this particular entrepreneur would have, and what he likes to be, what he wants to be, how he would serve the community. We need to identify, a moment to identify this organized, or this maybe the SMEs who has this heart for to become a social entrepreneur. Then I believe there is a lot of funding and a lot of opportunities for them. So I would believe that we, as we said, we have the policies. We have the policy, we set the policies, we promote the policies, and we say, this is the path. This is the way you could become a social entrepreneur, where we will recognize you as a social entrepreneur. And then you will have access to markets, you will have access to capital, you will have access for investors to come in. So, and also, like, I believe that some of the things that the students could do is, they can look into their, even in their own village to, to help some of the small SMEs, putting the accounts, teaching them a simple accounting system, because those are the important things, telling the entrepreneur the importance of running a business in a very accountable way. I really believe that if we can get those the system into to the entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, then I believe there will be a lot of opportunities to draw up capital. And now example, I think even the university students, if they come up with a good project, if I'm right, some of the banks do have this investment, if they come up with a good project for the university students, there will be banks to finance. I really believe. And this is an area that some of the students can look into, because I was recently, just before the COVID, I visited the Sabaragaon University, where they had the Entrepreneur Day for the students, Entrepreneur Studies, and some of the students had come up with a lot of good products, super products, I should say, innovative. And talking to these students, and they had the problem of accessing financing. And then we were discussing in the university how we could finance, and then we got the banks to come up. And I think if I'm right now, there is a good opportunity there. They can go up to ₹1 million of a very low interest loan for business startups for university students. And the main thing is that the product and the sustainability and the accountability. Those three can be met, then I would say there is funding. There is, even the big corporates would look into that. But for that, we need to have this set up an organization where we would promote these, like Dr. Lalit says, the social ventures that they are promoting certain small organizations, social enterprises. We can talk to the big timers, can talk to the corporates, and I really believe that we will we will have a very good opportunity to help these SMEs to come up and also to grow. So this is something that was in my heart that I could share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think those are very, very valuable points. So how we can support our students and how we can build their confidence. Right now, we are approaching the 1 o'clock, and we will go for the final round of discussion. Is there anyone who is interested to ask questions? So I will give the audience, the forum to audience. Anyone who wanted to ask any questions to the panelists? Right. Okay. I still wait until then. My final question is now. I will, start with as many of you suggested, social entrepreneurship is the new future. It's a kind of the dignity of our our life, and it is the future. So my question is now this concept, even though it's new and this is been discussed in several forums and different countries understood this concept, the differently, and some countries are giving much priority for this sector to flourish, so in that context, what lessons we can learn from some of these emerging countries in Asia or elsewhere? So with that, how we can support the government to build its capacity, okay, to form the right policies to promote this sector. So I think this will be my final question. So final round of discussion. I think you can spend a couple of minutes, not more than that. So in brief, what I'm asking you is that please share your experience. What type of lessons we can learn from some emerging countries in Asia or elsewhere. Say, for example, Bangladesh is a country which is pioneering this particular concept. So how we can build the capacity of the government to be able to select the right policy or right policy in the sense very, very inclusive policy to be introduced in Sri Lanka to govern this sector. So that is my last questions. I will give you 2 minutes for each of these panelists. Briefly tell us your opinion, so that will be the takeaway points for everyone in these forums. Okay. Now I will start with Victoria. So you can begin.
Thank you. I don't know that I'll need 2 minutes. My interest in social enterprises comes really from pretty much a career looking at the development sector, which is really about how do you make, major changes in society. And in my experience, observing this sector for 30 years, charity doesn't work. I'm interested in what does work, and this social enterprise model, where you're focused on outcomes and impact, but using a market to do it, works. And so I think the logic of a model which demonstrably works speaks volumes. The issue is how you tell that story. We've got some terrific panel members here today who are doing, a great job in Sri Lanka telling that story. We've got some excellent people in the university sector who are telling that story. We've got some wonderful young entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs here. So I think to the extent we can get the sector together to keep telling that story through, the leadership of, inspiring individuals, I think government will come along with this. My experience in government is that it doesn't lead, and it's not realistic to expect it necessarily to lead, particularly in difficult times like that, but it will follow a model that is demonstrably valuable and has demonstrated success. Thank you.
Thank you. I will invite Siran Karunaratne for your opinion.
Yes, I would agree with Victoria. I said if you look at, the aid does not make a big difference actually. Not much, but what we say is trade, not aid, but trade to aid is something that I really believe. And I just say, that awareness is the most important thing. And I've not studied the Bangladeshi situation, but one thing I know is in Bangladesh, the patriot organization, they have small businesses like, under the umbrella of the main organization, they have producers up to 4,000, 5,000 producers in one organization. And what they do is they talk about sustainability, they talk about productivity, they talk about the product development, they talk about the business development with each of these producers when they get together. And that's a work. And then I would believe if social enterprise can be built up in a very sustainable and accountable way, and the next stage would be a fair trade organization, which can change the whole scenario, even in the community. It's just an individual having a vision for a good sustainable, for a good accountable social entrepreneur, a program, a social entrepreneur business. And that can lead up to a lot of opportunities because I believe that that's the key forward. and the universities can do well. A lot of university students, they're talented, as someone said. I mean, they're the best brains that have gone up there. And let's use these brains, let's use, I mean, rather than, just getting a government job and, just, going there, signing at 8 o'clock and coming back by 4 o'clock when they have to work. But that's not what life is, to be honest. I mean, these university students have to really realize that they have got this education and they can be a part of this economy, not just to take from the economy, but to give it to the economy. So I really encourage these university students who are there with us, the nearly 100-odd university students, think what you can do. You're talented, you're very special. So think and have confidence in and just launch into a small business, think what is good and what you like to do. I mean, for example, Gospel House Handicraft is the organization that has turned into an organization where my late father's hobby was. His hobby was to make small wooden toys, using small pieces of strips of wood, and it has turned into a business. I mean, it was his hobby. And then, I mean, that little thing, that is in you, you have the confidence, you build on it. And I believe you have the finances coming in. You will see people coming and helping you out. You will see the banks running behind you and recognizing. And I think, for example, like social ventures in Sri Lanka, I've been talking with Lalit also. And recognizing these small entrepreneurs, small social ventures, small social organizations like Sustainable, who are working in a very good way. And that would promote them, help them to promote and then find whatever the assistance that is needed. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Now I invite Dr. Nimal for your concluding remarks. What are the lessons we can learn from other countries and how we can strengthen our government to think seriously on this particular sector?
So I think from my perspective, the social enterprise ecosystem and getting people to look into this segment is really great. It's sustainable. It has no challenges when it comes to funding cycles, and it's a more empowered approach in terms of finding solutions to real world problems. Now, I think, of course, we need to also be more pragmatic and realistic. From a SME perspective or a social entrepreneur perspective also, there requires to be some changes. When you look at most of the SMEs in Sri Lanka, they're very scared to even have proper accounting of their businesses. And as a result of that, even to get a loan or to show a forecast, and I think Lalit also mentioned this, even to come on the Empower board, some of those compliance guidelines is what makes SMEs really difficult because they are just not used to it, and they don't even believe the importance of doing that either for tax or other related issues. So I think they also need to start changing their way in terms of if they are to attract capital and if they are to get investors to come in and support them. Secondly, I think we need to also build capacity. We need to train our people, we need to guide them. And that's something that we see some of the other countries doing really well in the social enterprise space. Last but not the least, I think everybody in the ecosystem and the stakeholders need to work together in one common agenda, because together all of these entities and these ideas can make the world a better place. So for that, I think we need to have one vision. We need to collaborate with each other. We need to learn from the best, and we need to start replicating the best practices as well. And if we can do that, I'm sure whether there is proper policy directive or not, we might be able to achieve greater things. And then as a result of that, we will be able to solve problems and create impact. I thank you very much for inviting me today. It has been an absolute pleasure to share the platform with such eminent and passionate personalities.
Thank you, Dr. Nimal. And finally, Dr. Lalit.
Thank you. I have a very short answer. There are three things to look at. One is whether it's a policymaker or an entrepreneur or an ecosystem player. First thing is, you got to be entrepreneurial and enterprising. So we all need to think as entrepreneurs and think we have to act enterprisingly. Secondly, I think whether to make the policy or environment or the business environment the conducive, we really have to be innovative in terms of the policy innovations, business innovation, the creativity, all have to be there. I think this is something, we really have to strengthen innovative thinking. And thirdly, the passion. So we'll all have to be passionate about what we are doing. Whether you are a bureaucrat, making policy, you got to be passionate about what you are doing, and also look at passionately about the society and environment, how we can make policies to make our society better. If you are an entrepreneur, look at yes, you have to make profit, but you've got to be passionate about around your environment. Say how I can make my business to work for the poor people, address social problems, be environmentally friendly, be ethical. So those passion has to be there. So these are the three things: enterprising, innovation, and the passion. If we all think in the same line, I think we can make this country a better place for the social enterprises. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me again, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you today, and I'm really happy to share my the thoughts and views with the audience, and to make this conference the best conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lalit. I think this was so inspiring. To conclude today's session, and we started discussing about this important topic on government policy and how we can put this private sector people to invest on the important sector. I think we have discussed this matter lengthily with regard to the importance of separate policy for this, and how we can build a proper ecosystem to promote this sector. And also we have discussed a lot about how can establish the private-public partnership for this important sector. For me, to make social enterprise lively, I think we have to have a new policy for this sector, which is very, very important, as things are happening in Europe and particularly in UK. So I think we need to promote the sector through a new policy framework. This should be more inclusive, and policy should be prepared with the participation of several stakeholders. This should not come overnight. And also, as a whole, citizens should trust the government, and so that government also should build citizens' trust, which is very, very important. But unfortunately, if you look at the present day situation in government, there is high level of low trust prevail between the government and these citizens. So this gap should be reduced on this first hand. And for me, for a social entrepreneurship, I understand there are three things very, very important. One is the social enterprise should have pro-social goal. The social goal should be explicit and transparent and should be communicated for everyone, which is very, very important. And secondly, how we are mobilizing our citizens to toward this important sector, which is also very, very important. So for that, the creation of the ecosystem and building the social capital, which is part of it. And this is what these NGOs and the foundations are doing it, how we can mobilize it. So social entrepreneurship or social change cannot happen overnight, and it's an effort of many people. And finally, you have to have a viable economic model to be self-sustain. So you don't want to depend on external funding or government. to be independent financially, you have to have a viable business model. So considering these important features of social enterprise, I think I personally believe government has to seriously come up with an important, the policy framework for that. And if we have this sector functional, definitely the social entrepreneurship can complement some of the government duties in providing this public service. So the government burden also can be reduced. And finally, I also believe social entrepreneurship can be, the part of improving the democracy of this country. So if anyone interested to strengthen the democracy, because it is a process, so the social entrepreneurship also can contribute a lot. Finally, I thank each and every one of you in this forum. I think you have contributed a lot. The discussion was stimulating and inspiring. I thank each and every one of you personally for your contribution to make this event more lively and interestingly. Thank you so much. And I'm concluding from Peradeniya, and we'll see somewhere in other forum. Thank you, the Vesala University, inviting me to moderate this session, and thank you for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the SAY 2K22 team, I would like to extend my thanks to all the panelists, and also especially to Dr. Maheswaran. So now I think we would all agree that it was a very fruitful and informative session. So now we will break for lunch, and we will see you again at 2 p.m. At the next roundtable event, which is titled Sharing International Experiences in Higher Education Sector. Thank you.